Ladies and gentlemen, children of all ages, the Knights of the Braille proudly bring to you its profanity warning, where Jim will cuss you out at the drop of a hat. Richard will sit there and take it because he's a Southern gentleman. So if you are easily offended, I suggest that you GTFO right now.
I don't know about Southern Gentlemen, but Richard is here, and I'm Jim. And with us this week is Dylan. Dylan is a sighted accessibility consultant and designer focusing on augmented and virtual reality. He is the coordination and engagement team leader for the nonprofit XR Access and does research at UC Berkeley on applications of augmented reality for people with visual impairments. He also plays Dungeons and Dragons, which he's done for the past 10 years, and his favorite class is a wizard. So Dylan is a super nerd. Welcome, Dylan.
Thank you. I take that as high praise.
Well, you got to think Jim is saying it, so you know.
I know. Well, Dylan, let's get right into it. How did you get into working in accessibility? I've looked through your profile, and what got you interested in engaging with accessibility in general?
Well, it's I think the type of thing where I started out in UX design, user experience design, designing apps and all of that. And the core principle of UX design is to listen to your users' needs. And it was during my master's at Berkeley, where I started studying augmented and virtual reality just because it's kind of a wild west of interaction design, and there is all types of interesting new challenges around it. And I was at a convention presenting some of my research on kind of VR for engineering, basically. And I saw all of these amazing presentations on applications of VR and AR for accessibility. And it kind of got me started thinking just about how this is a technology that has been, I think, in a lot of ways fundamentally made for with the mindset of using it for people that are able-bodied, that are sighted, that have full mobility. But that if you turn some of the assumptions around on their head, it could be an absolutely amazing accessibility tool. And also that accessibility really should be a core part of UX design. I mean, there's 25% of the population that has a disability of some sort or another. And if you're just ignoring the needs of all of those people, you're not really a great UX designer, are you?
Yeah, I think it's really important to get into accessibility, especially with visual impairment, because now we're living longer and longer and longer, and people developing things like glaucoma, macular degeneration, cataracts, stuff like that. And eventually are going to be using all this stuff and going to have a huge disposable income. So it's a really good idea to incorporate it both financially and because it's just the right thing to do. But it sounds like not only did you want to try and meet the needs of people, but I always get the feeling that sighted people that work in accessibility must just be empathetic people. Do you feel, I know it's very braggadocious, but do you feel you're empathetic?
To a certain extent. I think I've done a lot of reflection on this because I am not disabled myself, and none of my close family there is disabled. So I get this question a lot of, well, kind of, why did you get into it if it's not something that directly affects you personally? And I think the answer for me is that in addition to it being very interesting and really working well for my brain that does loves kind of solving around requirements and modular bits and pieces, and hates just like blank slate wilderness. Besides that, I think it got started for me as a kid. I read all of this science fiction and got the wild idea into my head that technology could be used to help people. And yeah. And I think that the thing that it kind of made it click for me is that realizing that, wow, yes, technology can be used to help people. And if technology isn't made accessible, then it's not going to be helping oftentimes the people that need the most help, not necessarily because of their disability, but because of the discrimination that they face all over the place.
That's
Yeah.
really interesting to use the word discrimination, because I never use that word, and I don't think Richard uses it. He's going to make a joke now that he can't pronounce it, but
Nope.
but yeah, at times it is when you are making something that isn't usable by most of the population. But before we dive into the deep rabbit hole that's going to be VR in a moment, Richard, I did mention to you that Dylan made an app for WWE, so just giving you the platform now to thank him.
It depends on what the app is,
Oh yeah. Oh man,
Uh,
yeah. That was some of the work I did. Vertigo Software, and then who eventually got acquired by MLB, who eventually got acquired by Disney. Fish
Wow.
eats bigger fish, eats bigger fish.
right.
But it was it was a fun time. I'd never done WWE before doing these apps, and it was just, making a basically video player on Windows and on Roku and on any other VOD player under the sun.
Right.
Yeah, but yeah, we made sure it worked. We made sure it was ideally easy to navigate. Unfortunately, the company I was working at the time really didn't have anything in the way of accessibility standards, so I can't speak to the accessibility of them. But not a mistake I'd repeat going forward.
Right.
Well,
And I had noticed, like, more times than not, you could figure it out. It may not be 100% accessible, but once you figured it out, you're like, okay, yeah, I can use this. Now, granted, the first few times I was probably cussing at whoever programmed it, but after the fact, once I figured it out, it's like, okay, yeah, that is easy.
yeah, we always find a way, man. We're very adaptable. But
Exactly.
I'll talk a bit about my knowledge of accessibility with VR and games, and then hand it over to Richard, and then Dylan will call on your explanation. But I haven't dealt much with accessibility in gaming. I know a member of our community, Lemoyne, was promoting his YouTube video got 20,000 views where he was playing The Last of Us 2 with no functional vision, which was really cool. And there is a lot of accessibility coming into gaming, but to a small percentage of the industry. But where it is being brought out, it's being championed and promoted. In terms of VR, I've never interacted with it. The closest I've come is using an item like the Iris Vision, where they've converted a VR headset with a smartphone into a magnification device. But I've never actually used VR myself. Richard, have you used it?
The closest I've really come to it is two things that I can think of, and they're not exactly VR, at least not in my opinion, was an old gaming headset called the Virtual Boy, if anybody has ever played that.
Old school.
Yes. Many hours, blurry-eyed whenever I got through. And there was a YouTube video called the Virtual Barbershop, where you can put on your headset and play the video, and it actually sounded like you was getting your left side of your hair cut or the right side of your hair cut. That's about my extent of virtual reality.
So, Dylan, how does virtual reality become accessible?
It is a very good question. Let me first just describe real quickly for some of the listeners that might not be familiar with the terms, what exactly virtual and augmented reality are. So both of these are what falls under the kind of broad category of XR, or extended reality, which is to say that unlike a computer or a phone where the computing happens on a screen in this kind of contained rectangle, XR stuff happens all around you. And virtual reality means basically that you are putting on a headset that totally blocks out your vision and your hearing and transports you to a new kind of virtual reality. And so that could be, you're a space pirate training on a dock somewhere in the cyberpunk future, or you're an old school, knight going through a skeleton infested castle, or it could be also, things like doing physical therapy in VR, or any number of meditation and mental health purposes. There's a ton of applications in all of these. Compared to augmented reality is this idea that it's not blocking out anything around you. Instead, it's augmenting the world around you. So, you put on usually a headset like the HoloLens, or just looking through your smartphone at the world around you. And this includes things like, text to speech, or rather speech to text. So if you point your phone at a piece of text and it reads it off to you, that's augmented reality. It's taking this bit of visual information and adding on this bit of augmenting it with this audio information. And so, that's obviously a kind of a huge swath of different types of applications that you can do with either of these. But they have a lot in common when it comes to kind of the interface and when it comes to accessibility. Now, when it comes to making them accessible, there's kind of two big parts to it right now. One of them is taking all of the stuff that we know about 2D accessibility and bringing it into 3D. And so that's things like captions, right? Audio descriptions, making sure that those are available. And also thinking about, we don't necessarily know, unlike in a 2D screen, you can just put captions on the bottom of the screen, right? In VR or AR, where's the bottom of the screen? You've tried just putting it like locked to the user's head, but that can often be really kind of immersion breaking and kind of mess you up, your perception up. And so there's questions about, okay, how do we take captions and now remake them for 3D and design them and make sure that the caption files are augmented with spatial information and et cetera, et cetera. And then the other kind of broad category is the new stuff, the stuff that we haven't had to really make accessible before, but now there's this challenge to do so. And so you see that a lot with, for example, some of the mobility challenges, where a lot of the big kind of interesting things about VR and AR is you think about that kind of VR dungeon delving experience. If you're playing a game on a 2D console, you hit a button and it swings your sword. But if you're in VR, that could be you have a sword in your hand and you physically swing it, which is great and really cool. And I've tried it myself, and it's immersive and awesome. But also, if you can't physically swing a sword, we're going to need to figure out a way to map that to a button or somehow otherwise make that accessible. And there's solutions like there's something called Walk-in VR Driver on Steam that can help out with things like that. But it's kind of both of these big categories. There's a ton of individual challenges that we're taking on.
I never thought about the idea of a deaf person wearing a headset and then having text of what people are saying appear next to the people with spatial awareness, and they know who's saying what, and eventually that would be so cool. Like, I never even thought of that.
I hadn't either. That was a very good description because I was able to picture it, while you were explaining it. So, I mean, very, very awesome.
Thanks.
So in terms of blind accessibility, I know there's a lot of applications now, like they've just updated Seeing AI on the iPhone to read stuff for you, and is that the main focus at the moment for any kind of headset, like specifically augmented reality?
Well, when it comes to visual accessibility specifically, there's a couple of things. One of the big challenges, first off, is just trying to get screen readers to work in XR, which is a big challenge for a couple of reasons. Number one, as I'm sure you know, the screen readers have this challenge of taking this kind of 2D content, where you could have content anywhere on a screen, and putting it into an understandable and an understandable reading order, and then kind of reading it off one by one, right? And so you're taking 2D and converting it to 1D, where you have this stream of content. And with VR and AR, that gets even harder because it's 3D that we're now trying to condense kind of down into 1D. And so there's work being done around essentially having kind of alt text for 3D objects, where you can either try to kind of have things read out in some type of order that makes sense, or being able to have things guide you, sound being guided by sound to where an object is, and then having its important facets read out. And yeah, I think that's just kind of the tip of the iceberg, especially considering that a lot of this stuff isn't built in HTML. It's built in Unity or Unreal Engine, or these other kind of custom engines that don't have necessarily a good way of easily letting you interact with text. A lot of challenges with, you can't really copy and paste anything in VR right now. It's all basically one giant moving image of text.
Yeah.
So that's some of the types of things that we're grappling with.
So with the technology that they've been using for things like OCR, the optical character recognition, that's now working on objects as well, is that something that is becoming, so to speak, for us laymen, like standardized, that can be put into a lot of these products and then recognize the environment around you, or is it each developed individually?
It's a good question. I think we're still right now kind of on the closer to the each developed individually side. It's one of the things that we're really trying to work on with XR Access, is to get platforms like Unity, like OpenXR, kind of on board to help make some of this stuff standard, so that each developer doesn't have to reinvent it from scratch.
Yeah.
And it's interesting too, because there's a slight there's kind of two types of content here to think about, right? There's the challenge of tools that are made with kind of tools that are made as accessibility tools. Things like, okay, here's a phone app that will for example, perform OCR, and that is something that's probably going to be very useful to somebody who's blind, and not terribly useful to somebody who's fully sighted. And compare that to just the overall challenge of, here's this XR app that might do anything, and we want to make sure that it's usable both by people who are able-bodied and people with disabilities. So it's kind of products aimed at everybody that we want to make sure are inclusive, versus products that are aimed at specifically people with disabilities that we want to make sure are effective.
Yeah, that's the thing, is that some products just aren't accessible for us. And it's not discrimination, it's just the design of the, for example, game is specifically visual, like, some type of tabletop mini game, for example, it'd have to be tactile and stuff for us. So, I understand you're trying to make a product and then trying to include people without compromising your artistic vision, or what the purpose of it is in the first place. And I know that products like the Orcam, the Israeli developers for that, are really good at being able to specifically identify objects, but it's because that product is made specifically for that. But in terms of you saying about being able to locate via sound, I know at the moment it's predominantly beacons of some kind that would have to do that. But do you think it would get to the point in the future where you'd be able to tag objects in an environment and then use sound to maneuver around?
Yeah, no, I think that's one of the really exciting things that is basically what I focused my master's thesis on, was this idea that with, in the past, we've had, like you said, tags, things like Bluetooth beacons, RFID tags, where we could tag specific things and broadcast something and a signal that allows something else to interpret, oh, this is that thing we tagged earlier, right? The challenge of kind of generalizable recognition is really hard. But one of the things that you're seeing now with some of the things like the augmented reality headsets, like the HoloLens 2, or the LiDAR scanners on the new iPads, what those are starting to allow us to do is to basically scan the environment, and then use machine learning to help figure out what's in it. And so, for my master's thesis, we were working on this idea of AR for VIPs, visually impaired people. And some people, the community we talked to, loved that name, and some people hated it. So, apologies if you're in the latter group. But the fundamental idea was basically that right now, let's say it scans a table. The way hologram for the typical sighted user, around, if the hologram, there are little holographic knight dips behind the table, then the part of it that's covered disappears, and it knows the table is there, but it's just using that to make the other things it's doing more realistic. Whereas we kind of flipped that on its head and said, okay, hold on, if it knows the table is there, what if the user is blind and does not know the table is there? If we could find a good way to communicate that fact to the user, then wow, wouldn't that make an amazing basis for a kind of generalizable accessibility device?
Yeah, like a constant sonar with different pitches that obviously don't damage your hearing, that can be spatial and can share different pitches which signify distances, depths, heights. That would be really cool. You have all this sound around you subtly that you can recognize if something's close, and maybe even get a warning when it's even closer to you. That's really promising, because the way that stuff moves now, it seems that stuff comes around in only a couple of years rather than 10, 20 years as it was before.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think what we found during testing was, first of all, that if you try to put a sound on everything all around you, trying to hear everything means you can't tell where anything is. So that's a challenge. We ended up in the what we were working on, kind of narrowing it to a cone, so you could kind of scan your head around and understand, oh, there's something near to me here, there's something far away here. And from the feedback we got from actually talking with blind people and testing with blind people about it, we added this idea of text recognition being one of the main foci, where this will tell you, hey, there's something that maybe could be a sign right here, a billboard or something. Then you activate the text recognition, and it tells you that there's the text.
So now you've got a landmark for your spatial awareness.
Right. And so the classic is the bus stop challenge, right? Where the GPS gets you to within maybe a block of the bus stop, and now good luck finding where the actual bit is, and haven't let alone reading it and figuring out if it's the right bus stop. So I think that basically testing around that and refining that interface and understanding what's useful. And the research I'm doing now, by the way, focuses on, instead of replacing sensory substitution, of replacing it with sound, it's actually visual aids, where we take something that might blend into the background, and instead we try putting this bright yellow high contrast block there, so oh, there's something there. I can't quite make out the edges of it just based on its normal appearance, but with this extra cue, now I understand it's about yay big, I can navigate around it.
Oh, I'm sure the military will make very good use of that, Dylan.
Yeah. Yeah, I know there's this whole thing with the military just bought a whole bunch, I think like a $22 billion investment in HoloLenses, which I think I feel conflicted about, but at the very least it's a promise that this is something that's has good hopes of actually being effective. It's sadly the human condition that we try to use anything we make to kill people first, and then try to use it to help people. But here we are.
Kills them, it can save them. Then
sleeping is better money. It's fine. Don't worry about it. That's really cool and very promising. I think from the sounds of everything you're working on it and trying to do. I mean, Richard, is this something that you think you'd ever try, or?
Oh man, I'd be down to try it. It would depend on as long as it ain't like $22 billion to give it a shot,
Yeah.
then because that's a lot of the problem for most of the community is they're either on like a really low fixed income or stuff like the Orcam is just a bit out of people's price range.
Yeah, and I do need to caveat kind of all of this stuff with it's still in the research phase right now.
Right.
Because it's still like $5,000 for a HoloLens. And also the unfortunately right now it's not quite good enough at scanning to tell you that there is a wall there before you bump into it.
I have that problem all the time.
Yeah. We're hoping in the next 10 15 years that it's going to get faster to the point where rather than it saying, hey, I don't think I have a full scan, can you kind of fully tilt your head back and forth and like hop up and down on one foot until we've got a full scan, that soon instead it will be like, oh yes, you walk into a room, bam, here's the scan, or bam, here's a scan that somebody else took 10 minutes ago, and let us display it for you with the bathrooms and other useful features pre-tagged and annotated. There's lots of potential there.
So how would it work off like a satellite or cell phone signal, or like to receive the images and be able to, I guess, send them to like a database and
Probably either Wi-Fi, or I know there's a lot of enthusiasm around the possibilities of 5G with this being kind of fast enough to get this type of 3D mapping data on the fly.
yeah.
There's also a big conversation going on around privacy.
Right.
Because yes, you could potentially have something like automatic face recognition dipping into a giant database and telling you, hey, here's your friend Stu. But if the cost of that kind of a nifty accessibility feature is Facebook or whoever else gets, live stream data of everybody you meet for the rest of your life,
Right.
you might need to talk about that.
And I can see that being a major problem, why it is beneficial someone who can't see, to have, oh yeah, well there's Stu, I don't want to talk to him, so let me turn around real quick and leave. But at the same time, there is a big privacy thing there. Now, me, I'm an open book, so I don't care. But, there's not a lot of people like that.
Yeah, I don't want my meetings with Russian intelligence agents to be caught on camera in the middle of the evening.
So that's why I got to stay away from Australian intelligence. You got to watch out for them.
Australians don't have any intelligence. Anyway, it sounds really cool. And before we go on to Dungeons and Dragons and potentially augmented reality and VR, which I'd love to know about, it sounds like this thing's quite a ways off. By the time it comes around, I'm sure it will be put into a cell phone, packaged with a nice plastic headset that costs a few bucks and won't break the bank by the time it gets to folks like us. And I'm sure it will have tiers of usability for your grandmother to your teenage son, because that's another big part for you as a UX designer, right? Is level of usability. But yeah, it sounds really cool, man. But in terms of D&D and getting into it as a sighted person, have you, I'm sure you have, had any thoughts about how this would be used with D&D?
Yeah, there's a couple of interesting applications that have kind of popped across my desk so far. I think a couple of them have to do with just being able to take pen and paper and dice and really much more easily turn that into sound. Because I've been playing for a couple sessions now with some folks over on the Candlekeep side of things.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of fun, but also, wow, I had not quite realized before now just how nasty like D&D Beyond and some of these other, even custom character sheets can be for trying to look up like, hey, what's my attack bonus for this weapon? or even hell, what weapons do I have handy? Like it can be a real pain to try to grab all of that. And so I think, I don't know how much it's AR versus better AI. I think the two go hand in hand, but being able to do things like, look at a character sheet and have the system kind of pull out the important stuff, or be able to roll physical dice if you want to, and just have it immediately pop out the number. I think those are some great things that, features I'm sure a lot of people would love to see.
So, as a sighted user of augmented reality and VR, do you see LARPing taking off in the future with these devices?
Oh boy. Well, there's some very interesting there's very interesting social aspects of especially VR, where, well, just in that everyone has known since the dawn of the internet that nobody on the internet is who they look like, right? If it's
Don't tell everybody my secret. I'm 6'5",
Rich is a
270
beautiful
pounds.
woman, Dylan. So.
right. Well, for example, I went into VR chat a couple of times, and you see people that are dressed up as normal folks. You see people that are giant dragons. You see people that are cartoon characters. And of course a giant contingent of anime girls. It's just all over the place.
It makes me think so much about the book Ready Player One and Ready Player Two.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's almost identical to things that are going on in those books.
Yeah, and I think there's a very interesting question for for especially for folks in the blind community of when it comes to that type of kind of self-representation and of being able to customize your appearance and customize how you appear to others. How do we want to handle that? How are you able to enter a description for your avatar that gets read out loud to folks that are using screen readers? Like, how the heck is that going to work? And how can we make sure that folks that can't just look and see whatever custom avatar other folks have rigged up are getting an equivalent experience?
But Dylan, we can attach ourselves to another player as a sighted guide, man. It'll be amazing. They can tell us about all the degenerates and laughing.
So all of them then. Yeah.
When you were talking about entertainment earlier, I was just sitting there thinking he's going to mention pornography in a moment, because as soon as
I was waiting on it.
Well, right after the military is the porn industry. There's the first two big users of all new technologies.
Oh, absolutely. That's amazing, man. Yeah, well, if you ever need remote testers, you've got a whole community here. And how can people support what you're doing if we can support in any way?
Sure. Well, I would say check out XR Access. That's the organization I'm working with. It HTTP, all the normal www.https xraccess.org, xraccess.org, because we are always looking for people with lived experience of disabilities to help contribute to these conversations. We want to make sure it's not just a bunch of able-bodied people that are guessing at what's best. We want to make sure that we have people with disabilities as agents, as people that are actively contributing to this conversation and being the ones to help create the technology. So definitely check that out. You can find me at I'm on Twitter at usabilityfox, or my portfolio at drfoxdesign.com. And always, I'll have to admit, a lot of the stuff I've been working on has been less D&D and more kind of mobility and things like that. So if people have ideas about how VR and AR can be used for D&D, absolutely hit me up.
That's awesome, man. Thanks so much, Dylan. And I've talked to you briefly after the podcast about some accessibility stuff. we're trying out and get your thoughts on it. But Richard, do you have anything you want to share before we leave?
No, I'm just like not really flummoxed, but just like in awe of like, this would be so cool. It's actually like you're living in a video game, because you're getting the input and not to be like I can't think of the word off the top of my head, but to be able to, walk without worrying about bumping into a wall again, or being able to see in a way again. It's just the way technology is, man. It's fantastic. Just don't give it to Jim, and don't give it to Jesse either, But
I think
mean,
that's so cool.
it's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, man, and like it's really cool that you're covering multiple disabilities. Like being deaf is so isolating. I don't think people realize quite how isolating it is. The idea that you could get real life closed captioning is fucking awesome. That you could do that. I think it's amazing. But I think it's even cooler that in like 20 years you'll be able to stick on a VR headset, hang out with your buddy halfway across the world, and go adventuring in Faerun or something. I think that's so fucking cool, man.
Don't call me,
yeah.
Jim. Don't call me. But yeah,
I mean, for those sighted folks, Richard, I mean, I think that would be so cool. Like that they
it would be.
Yeah, man, for sure. By then we'll have robot eyes, so don't worry.
Yeah, exactly. We'll be taking over the world.
Well, everybody will get one Geordie visor for free.
Oh yeah.
Oh, here we go.
Well, thanks so much for joining us, Dylan. I'm sure we will have you back on to talk about more accessibility in the future. But everyone, please check out Dylan online. You can get him on Twitter at usabilityfox. And I will include his links and information in the description. Thanks, Dylan.
Absolutely. Thanks very much for having me. It's a great conversation.
Except for the fact that it's me and Jim. But you know what? We'll catch y'all next week then.